right, on to the book study. And I would like to say that just relating to time, I would rather we talk as much about Chapter 5 as we want and postpone Chapter 6 to next time rather than prematurely eliminate or cut off discussion on one just so we can get to the other. So not to delay you, purposely, unless you're really rare to go.
Sides up, pull it down. Pull it down to make it work. Go up to make it go up.
So Mr. Froelich will lead us into Chapter 5, the first principle.
Well, unless the conversation part gets really big, we have plenty of time to get Jane in tonight.
Okay.
We already kind of worked that out, that we were trying to make this happen in one night.
Okay.
So
Very good.
We'll just see if the conversation, if the conversation goes longer, so be it. But I certainly don't have it prepared to be real long. And I did want to clarify, because I did expect that we were doing both of ours tonight. So I wanted to make sure you knew that mine was the main event. So it says it right there. It's been a while since we've actually been on this subject, so I thought it'd be a good idea to do a very, very brief recap of what we did to get here. Chapters 1 through 4. In Chapter 1, the discussion centered around the idea that the students are actually our customers. And I think it's a real important concept that we ingrained throughout our culture. Probably for most, maybe not most, many, this is their first generation to have many viable options on what they might be able to start doing in the way of schooling. And in order to have success, I thought it was just one thing. I love the guy. They have to come in with the attitude of, you gotta wanna. And I've actually seen that used in business circles as well. But and then nothing happens.
Needed to move.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Yeah, told you it was going to be brief. I think we froze up. She was froze up on her end too.
Should have never said anything.
You overtaxed it.
I know.
Yeah, well, we'll leave ours alone and let you get it. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Chapter 2, conversation centered around the idea of motivating teachers or how they are motivated. And I found it interesting that, it's already an assumption that they're motivated by their desire to give. And I'd have to say that's pretty accurate with most people that get involved in that profession. Having said that, the engagement, in order to start to judge it and have something to work with, the idea of using the family engagement, you'll embrace that natural desire they already have to give. Enjoyed looking at the idea there's 3 different kinds of teachers: the happy, peppy teachers, the wait and seers, and the not gonna do it's. Once again, ironically, in the business community, you have very similar nature of people. Some are ready to just dive right in, get it done, and they're going to meet it with a smile on their face. Others want somebody else to try it a little while and see how it goes, and some are just going to fight it all the way. Okay, I'm not having any success again. Thank you. Chapter 3 was to get a good understanding of what disengagement is, and to think about it in a manner that just says, what if disengagement was actually not apathy, but if there were reasons behind their disengagement? That kind of hit home to me a little bit, because I hadn't thought through it in that way before. The author does point out that, and I believe he says in 30 years of being in education, he never found a single parent that actually didn't care about their children. They may not really know how to act upon it. They may not know how to get involved. They may not know what to do, but they do care. Their disengagement may be from an anxiety of one sort or another. And in chapter,
Looks like you're getting the volume.
well, it does say volume on it.
That's always been,
Okay.
hit the like button, the green button, is it still on? Oh, you're good now.
I don't know. Chapter 4 just talks about determining a starting point, kind of giving a base point to start. Gives us a suggested questionnaire and a point system to use to lay out 5 simple principles in it and then define them. From then, we move on into Chapter 5. I don't have any idea what I'm doing wrong here. Yep, I'm going to set it down and quit worrying about it. So starting in 5, the principle number 1, a culture that engages every family. The idea to me is, we got to put the emphasis on the every, and I think that's where the struggle usually comes in at. Nancy, I need you to click 1, please. What is the illusion that there is a culture, or the illusion that is culture again? One more time. How many legs do you see? And then as you try to count them and look a little closer, does that kind of get a little bit obscure to you? It does to me. I've looked at it multiple times now. So sometimes it isn't always what you see that's really going on. The culture of any business or any school can be similar to this. At first glance, a school might seem to have a culture that it does engage every family, but upon a deeper look, does it really? And I think their studies are showing that most schools don't, and that they need to actually change the culture. Nancy? A culture is something that permeates everything from the way people act to how they dress, what they talk about or avoid talking about, whether they seek out colleagues for help or whether or don't, how teachers feel about their work, their students, families, and the families of students. I did find it interesting, the author went on to say that there is no question that we are at a crossroads in education. There's the potential to positively reshape and reaffirm the basic tenets of education so that all students benefit from it. Successful schools have at their core a rich and positive school culture. As has been clearly shared, there's no real reform without a permanent shift in culture, and part of that shift must be family engagement. At this point, I would like to ask the board to think a little bit and open up for discussion. What is your perception of the culture that we have in R31? Board and administrators, whoever wants to speak.
Well, I think it's building the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I have. This has been something that I have really studied and watched for years, like the culture of a building. You can walk into even any store in town and feel the culture of the store. Like you could go into 5 different gas stations, and each gas station is going to have the same things. They're going to have gas. They're going to have things you can buy. They're going to have soda machines and that. But are you being welcomed? Are you being talked to as a person? Is it clean? Is it, so every school, every building in our district, I think, has a different culture too. And it's just who makes up that building. Because, they're all individuals coming together to make like one building a certain way to function.
Well said. Next.
I think in some respects it would be difficult for us to go into a building and assess it because we're on the board. A lot of people over the schools know that, so we might get a different reception than certain families might.
I've heard Dr. Zales make the comment before that whether they intend to or not, the conversation changes when an administrator walks into a building. when a board member walks into the building.
True.
Yeah, I
And-
think it causes, what it causes the culture is a strategy, and the sooner you move it off of something that just happens because people are nice or what have you, to actually being strategic about what are you going to do differently as an individual teacher to engage a family differently than you may have before, or as an administrative team, what are you doing to break down the word perception? It doesn't matter that I can come in and answer a question. When you don't engage families and then I come up with 5 things that we do to attempt to do so, if the perception from the community or the families is that you don't do it, then you have to push aside what you know and deal with what people think. And
What does that say,
That-
perception
Is reality.
yeah,
Reality.
I wasn't trying to speak in
Yeah.
cliches.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we're at.
Mhm.
You know, we get a little bit caught up in when we do these parent nights and these social activities where we feed, and there's a time that begins and a time that it ends. And that's our definition of involvement or engagement. And from that, we got searching for the next thing, the next shift in thinking. And you have to get off of event driven to more just becomes a part of what you do. And with, I have applied.
But
I really, that's really a hard perception piece because everybody thinks we all know the answers to a lot of things, but it doesn't matter what we know if the people don't believe that's occurring.
In my own business, we had a team meeting recently, and one particular goal on a scale of 1 to 10, we need to be at I think it's a 9.6 in order to hit the goal I'm trying to hit. And one of those is offering people a review. Yeah, and they have to acknowledge it in their response back to the company that they were offered a review. And I will look at a survey that says that they were never offered a review. And I can go back to the notes and see they've been offered 3 reviews. But when I present that to my team, I can't say, yeah, we offered a review and we're right and they're wrong. I say, somehow we didn't do it in a manner with that they accepted it as we were giving them that offer. And we've got to figure out where that missing piece to go from a 9.5 to a 9.7. One person too many. They were offered 3 of them, but they didn't think they were. So the reality was they were offered. Their perception was they never were offered. They're right, we're wrong. I think it's very similar to what you're saying here.
And I think also going back to Dr. Bell's, it's not like you say, an event. It's not like a 7 to 9 p.m. thing. Actually, every educator in this district, everybody that has anything to do with the school, whether it be a bus driver, a janitor, the teachers, us, you're actually on 24/7. And you better be showing that, number one, this district is the best district in your heart. You believe it. You're going to walk the walk. You're going to talk the talk. I mean, really, you are. Because no matter how you act, what you do, what you say, across the fence to someone, that is building the culture of this entire district. So really, it's kind of, we're the face of it. With
I agree.
anybody that's involved, we're the face of it. And hopefully, people realize that our hearts are in that.
Well said. Any other comments? Questions or suggestions on it? The author then goes on to point out that over the years there's been many attempts with different initiatives to do things, and there's been improvements in many ways, but they seem to kind of fizzle away. The initiatives get started, they fizzle before the end of the year. Initiatives don't last because the culture of organizations never changes to embrace and sustain the idea. I had a conversation with Mr. Henshaw about something I thought was this new, really great idea that we saw at the retreat. And our conversation got to, it's real easy to chase that new idea all the time. and they're good ideas, but chasing a new one every 3 to 5 years is not changing a culture. And we need to just always be working on what is the culture of R31 going to be about.
Yeah, as he says, culture can eat change for lunch. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty emphatic.
Yeah, I like that. If you'll go on, please. Now we're going to talk about the Marshall family. You may think of them as someone else when you look up there, but I just thought that was kind of a neat family picture. I'm going to very much condense the story about the Marshall family just to kind of make the author's point. Their child is going to a classroom where the teacher is extremely involved in the idea of engaging a family. Multiple contacts made, multiple personal visits made to their homes and so forth. And the parents of that student thought that was absolutely wonderful. Their child was thriving in it. They appreciated the teacher. They thought everything was great. The next year, the child goes to another teacher who was very well thought of teacher, who does a very good job, didn't appear to have any blemishes in their history or whatever, but that teacher wasn't reaching out quite as pointedly, quite as often, wasn't going in and doing a home visit and so forth. Their expectation by the first teacher got raised so high that the second teacher they were extremely disappointed with. Whether the analogy they're using here is rather extreme in what they would expect a teacher to do, like the first teacher, is kind of irrelevant. What I'm really seeing from it is until the culture changes and is similar teacher to teacher to teacher, grade to grade to grade, you're going to have that problem where their perception, as we just discussed, is altered by that first teacher, that first experience. And now anybody that's less than that or different than that might be getting some pretty low marks from that family. Fair or not fair, it doesn't matter. It's that family's perception is that teacher isn't really doing their job.
I think that leads into consistency.
Yeah.
Because I think no matter whether you're buying a product or even your service, there's always the expectation of consistency. And I think that you expect that too when you're going from, I know personally having kids in different areas, and teachers do what they have to do, right, to make it work. But as me, I'm like, well, if I've got these two teachers doing this, why are these two teachers not doing that? But that's that was my expectation. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're doing right or wrong.
Right. The teacher that had done such a great job in the engagement was Mrs. Knight, and I had made a note to myself, and I almost missed it here, that I think Mrs. Knight is the one person alive that has found 26 hours in the day and 8 days in the week if she's actually doing everything that they kind of laid her out to be doing. But regardless, if there can be better efforts made, I think is what the real point is, and having that ingrained into us as a culture. The author, Stephen Constantino, suggests that a district wanting to change their culture to one that truly does engage every family would start with forming a board policy that includes measurable change, and also to be certain that professional learning for teachers is consistently contained as a component of family engagement and what they're being offered each and every year. Just in summary, in my opinion, I believe we have a great culture in R31, but as in everything, there's always room for improvement. And I think the idea of more family engagement is hard to overlook as being something that'd be very valuable to focus in on better. Any more comments or questions?
I thought the case study was interesting. I believe in this chapter it was the one about was it the Science Fair project?
I think
Is it this chapter or the next one?
I think it was my chapter.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not.
Oh, no, this was about the project, yeah. Where the
Where the child didn't turn it in on time?
Right.
No, this is the one where, well, let me make sure I've got it clear. This is the one where the mother was concerned that they didn't have printing capability
Yeah.
at home.
They couldn't
yeah.
keep up with
Yeah,
the
that's
Joneses
just-
because
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't have the materials to do it, and the teacher kept saying, well, you know, she'll be able to do it fine, don't worry about those limitations. But then when they showed up that night, you know, and the parent was just concerned for the child, not that the child wouldn't succeed in the learning objectives, but, you know, just kids compare, kids, you know.
Sure they did. And hers was left in the classroom,
Yeah.
and others were like put out in the hallway.
Yeah. And in this scenario, the teacher and the principal seemed to be pretty clueless as to why they were so upset, which is kind of mind-boggling, but, you know, there are those out there, I guess. You know,
Well, and to make their point, they set it up in a fairly extreme way
Yes.
which was to make their point. I mean,
Right.
I would hope if it ever came out that way, they would understand pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Whoops, we blew that.
I think
If I was the parent who was the atmospheric engineer and I knew that they were doing a project on the plants, maybe I would have said, let me come talk to your class rather than just making my own child's project for them,
yeah.
which is what it appeared to be. Anyway, I was a little blown away by,
And that's when you decide, that's when you form student partner teams and have them do all their work at school,
yeah,
not at home.
right.
So they all know that.
Yeah.
I
Maybe
mean, or all
if the
similar.
teacher knows the families and
Right.
knows that this person is an atmospheric engineer, maybe the teacher invites that person.
Well, I think if you have a district that has a culture of engaging families, that's when you're going to have teachers or PTOs or whatever that have some of these supplies to actually give this kid. You know,
Well,
I mean,
what was it
for a
that-
few dollars, this kid could have been given a few things. And not that I advocate teachers
Battery-powered spindles
continually
and stuff.
spending money out of their pocket, but you know they do. You know.
But I know we also see so many times that rather than ask, the child just does without. They're embarrassed to ask or let you know that they don't have it, or no different whether it's a new pair of basketball shoes for a kid to play basketball or supplies to raise their level of their presentation. That's
So
a tough
the
one.
sad thing is, in a scenario like that, everybody comes out of that with a worse perception of things than they had before.
Right. I agree. Well, I'll leave it up to everybody's discussion here if we want to.
Well, just to continue on that particular case study, they talked about access to computer at home or print, and we have discussed that.
Right.
Or how do we handle that situation where people don't have access at home? So I know they're studying that, so that is a concern.
And it's been long enough ago that I shouldn't be trying to pull up a number out of my head, but it wasn't like 92, 93% said they had relatively easy access to it, but we were figuring out,
A little shy of that, but
okay,
yeah, as part of the next tech plan, we have one-on-one devices, certain, when we start that, it'll be a discussion.
right,
Recommendation from the tech team.
Well, that device is one thing, but access to the internet's then the other thing.
right,
Do they have that at home?
right.
Yeah, we're able to do that too, phone.
I thought question 7 after that was interesting. What do you think the real purpose of this project was? You know, and, you know, was it, I mean, presumably the purpose is for the kids to learn, but there seemed to be, to me, a purpose of displaying them to impress people. You know, so the less impressive ones were in the classroom, you know, so less visible, you know, and so you hate to think it would be, hey, look what I'm teaching, you know, that kind of thing, look how well my kids are doing, but that can creep in sometimes.
All right, thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Tony. Mrs. Haskell?
You wanna go on?
Certainly.
Okay. Well, that's it, yeah. All right. Engage every family. My chapter was chapter 6. You can go to the next one. And it was on principle number 2, which is to communicate effectively and build relationships. So there are a lot of ways that they talked about. This chapter had so much information in it, we could like have a whole year's study on this chapter, I think. And actually, you know, this is something I would like to talk to the board about later, but, you know, like doing some of these actual things that they had in this chapter, some of these checklists and some of these things that schools can actually look at. What are we doing? How are we doing it? What do we see? What are some of our percentages? And so I'm hoping that maybe next year, instead of doing another book study, we could actually come back to this book and actually work in the schools with some of these checklists and some of these things that we were looking at, because we could really delve a lot into this and kind of take a kind of a self look at us and at the schools. I mean, like the teachers and the administrators can look at their individual buildings and see, really, what are we doing? What can we do better? Because we know, as Tony said, we can always do better. Yeah, we're doing great, but we can always do better. But anyway, there's a lot of interesting things on this to go with the communication. That's all right, communicating effectively and building relationships. But they did a lot of things. They talked a lot about staff training, community outreach programs. I'm going to talk about these others in just a minute. Training parents and family leaders, family nights, family hall of fame, family week, and celebrating the community. But on this topic of communicating effectively and building relationships, these were the 3 core ideas that he said were essential. The first one is building effective relationships and thus trust with every family. And that trust is the key thing. And there were quite a few different like little scenarios on there about that. The second, communicating effectively with every family. And the third, creating welcoming environments in schools to promote active family engagement. And each of these things I'm going to talk about a little separately. So we'll go to the first one, building effective relationships and thus trust with each family. So I think that's just the next heading of the slide. So we deal with, within our buildings, we deal with all kinds of parents and all kinds of students. We all know that. So these are suggestions for reaching the hard to reach. However, it's like they said, what are we really saying are the hard to reach? Are the parents hard to reach, or is it what we're doing or what we're not doing? You know, because every parent actually, you know, they don't send their best to school. They send what they have to school, and those are, you know, those are the ones that we're going to have to try to get. So we have to believe that reaching out to these families has value and worth, and that our time is worth the effort. So I'm going to go to something else here. I want to. I thought I had some notes here that I wanted to talk about. No. Okay. So when we talk about suggesting for reaching the hard to reach, they said that really it might be our terminology saying they are the hard to reach. And it's really what we're doing. And it said it's not that we're doing, it's not that we don't want to do things more, we just sometimes need to do things differently. Like where we hold a meeting or what time we hold meetings. You know, do we have to have a meeting after school from 3:30 to 5? Could we have a morning breakfast meeting? Could we have a lunch meeting? Could we meet the parents somewhere else, wherever it's easier for them when they're getting off work? These types of things where, you know, can we do that? And I know teachers, and it said in there, teachers are saying, my gosh, you know, I have 9,000 things to do. How can you expect me to do more? But again, they say it's not about doing more, it's just about doing things differently, just taking a different look at them, you know. Anyway, secondly on there is believing that reaching out to families has value and worth of our time and effort. And so it's really the belief that if we take the time to do that, you know, and I know our staff and teachers do that. And embody the ethic of caring. You know, in our society, there's so many, everybody's so busy that sometimes it's just like another thing to take care of. And so he's talking about, you know, to really embody that feeling of caring, that you truly care for these children and what's happening. Keep an open mind about the family, regardless.
Jane, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
You know, you hear a lot of people say things like everybody's busy.
Mm-hmm.
And in a certain sense, that's true. I mean,
Right.
lives are a lot busier than they used to be. But one thing I found is that even busy people will find time to do things that they feel are important,
Exactly.
you know. And so, you know, and when something is vitally important, you know, busyness is not really a good obstacle to accept.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I stopped.
No, no. Just keeping an open mind about the family, regardless of who they are and where they live. There was this story in there, if you remembered, about they wanted to get a meeting with some parents, and they sent flyers. They had babysitters. They had food. Everything, and hardly anybody showed up. So I guess they had a consultant said, well, we're going to find out. And they said, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go ask them. So they went to the house, knocked on the door, and said, you know, the consultant said, the lady invited them in, and she had on a robe and her rollers. It was kind of in a tenement thing, and said, you know, did you hear about this? Yes. Did you get information about it? Yes. Did they say you'd have child care? Yes. You knew you were going to have food? Yes. Well, you still didn't come. And she said, if you remember, I know what they think of me over there. And so no matter what, she had, you know, the thought that they did not think she was probably good enough or worthy enough, whatever, where she came from. Right, felt judged. So, I mean, do you think those are areas in our schools that anybody thought about that? Like, do you think some of our parents might feel like that?
Oh, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
I feel
think,
like that from their own experience as children.
Exactly.
In the school that they attended, whether or not it was in our district or not.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Many of them have scars from, you know, their history,
right.
education. Not
Right.
as parents, but as kids.
Right.
And it's kind of human nature to always be a little suspect of institutions that you're not involved with, whether it's government, schools, you know, whatever, you know. But to me, what it points out is perceptions need to change on both sides. You know, it's easy for us to think they don't care about their kids, and it's easy for them to think we don't care about their kids. When you just kind of want to say, hey, everyone, we all care about these kids, so let's do what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think in some cases, it's like the actual proof. I mean, like when they actually see you, the person, interact with their child and see what you are doing with them, and inviting those people into your school and try to get them there. But, you know, and that, like, took them going to the house, you know, for that. But, yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting because she just had that perception that I know what they think of me, and she wasn't going to come no matter what. Yeah. Then it says to have also to set high expectations for the relationship. And so, you know, we have to have people going into it that want to make it work. You know, that's what their goal is. And then to be sensitive to the needs of families. And I'm going to, there's some more things on the next slides about that. Now, there were some really interesting things. Yeah, great. This I thought was tremendously interesting when I had never thought about this, communicating effectively with every family. When you talk about it, working with families with limited English proficiencies. And in there they talked about how, you know, like, let's say that you were new to this district and you came in the front door. Would you be able to make it up to Dr. Zallis's office? Are there signs showing where his office is? Are there? Yes? This says?
But we hide them so they can find
Yeah. But, you know, like, so, you know, if you walked into the elementary school, any school, would there be you know, like, or do you know where to park? Do you know, like, what walkway to go in, what door to go in, where to park? Is this parking place okay? How do I get to this building? How do I go to the nurse's office? How do I check my child out? You know, all those
You
things.
even know if it's okay to go.
If you don't, exactly. And so then think about it if you are limited in your English? How hard that would be. So a lot of what we're doing in our districts, and when I thought about it, I was like, gosh, that, kind of like a hit in the head, make it so much, it would make it so much easier. And they said, have, and we probably could do that in this community, have people that speak that language be interpreters, like probably volunteers in our schools. So when that family comes, there will be a person there that can totally understand and explain to them exactly what this letter home is, or what this, policy is, or whatever. And a lot of the customs of these children and these families, they don't talk to authority in their country. They don't know about an open door policy in their country. And so to have those interpreters that we could call on to be in our buildings when something like that happens would make it just so much simpler and helpful. So that just makes it more inviting for them to come in.
We should just train our people to talk like this.
I really liked when we were doing the presentations when they talked about the classroom dojo. How it translates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Right.
One of the things it talked about was a welcome sign, and I think you told me one time, Dr. Zales, how many languages are represented in our school district?
26.
It's quite.
Yeah, Craig, I'm gonna look at you.
It's
We
close
used
to
to
30,
remember
I
off the
think.
top of my head. I used to know that.
Jim said 26.
No, I think you
He's
told me
not-
it was
he's
close
not-
to 30.
Probably not far off.
Yeah.
There was one time. that
And
I
so if we had a welcome sign in each building that had every language, I think it would be kind of cool, but it would be a lot of languages that are represented here. So
Especially, especially here.
Yeah, it was over 30, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still.
I thought at one time you had said it was like 31, but that was
Yeah,
probably.
but I don't want to be
32.
quoted as that, because I know that's still to be the case.
Don't quote.
More than 3.
Yeah, there's-
It's quite a few.
Right.
But these teachers, not just academically have to figure out, but also hygiene-wise, they have to explain
Yes.
head lices, and, so, we were talking about
Yeah.
that earlier, but.
Yeah, but if I put myself in that situation and I had to move to Japan or China or something like that, and I was putting my kids in school, that'd be hard.
Right.
That'd be so hard to know.
Where to go. Or
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was kind of neat. And, we probably have enough volunteers that something like that could occur to a certain level, The special needs ones also kind of really intrigued me because it talked about how, families with special needs students already kind of have a hard time, because their child is special needs. So they're, no matter what it be, speech, language, whether it's a mental disability or physical disability, whatever. And so a lot of times when they come into meetings, they come into these meetings and they have 8 people sitting around the table. The administrator, the teacher, the special ed teacher, maybe the whoever, and how intimidating that is. And so they said, and I know a lot of our schools do, but to have a person with them to kind of walk them through, the processes, and this is who this is, and this is what they would do for you, and all that. Just all talking about more engaging and not just having them feel like they're alone out there. So that was kind of neat. Home visits is something that they talked about, and I know that's a really hard thing, I think, that would be difficult for teachers to do, home visits. I think in some cases it's very effective, but once again, asking teachers to do more. Again, sometimes it's not more, it's just doing things differently, but I think it would open the eyes to a lot of what some of our children, we have children in our district that it's surprising they make it to school every day. In every district's like that, it's not just ours. Another interesting thing was the weekly folders. It said right now all of our weekly folders go home at the end of the week on a Friday or a Monday, and they have what the children had done that week. And then they have the parent signature. Well, they said, well, why, go on and do it, but do it differently. And I thought that was such a good idea. So send home a weekly folder on what's going to be happening. This is what we're working on next week. We're going to be studying this next week. And instead of just a signature that the parent saw it, pose a question.
Some kind of a constructive response.
Yeah. Right, like pose a question about, about what you're going to be studying next week. So it's just a different way of thinking. How do you think that would be a reaction? What do you think our teachers, or do you think that'd be a better way to do
I
it?
think the weekly folder was a great idea of doing the same thing just differently.
Differently,
So it's not a
exactly.
more time
Right.
kind of
Right.
thing on the teacher.
Yeah.
There's something they were already doing, just tweaking it
Uh-huh.
a little.
And I kind of liked it, like, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this, when you have 9,000 things going home, and I had the 3 kids at home, and I was working, my husband was working, and, folder, yeah, just sign it, so that it wouldn't get in trouble, that it came back signed, It's like, but if you have actually something, this is what you're doing next week, what?
That appalls me to hear
Are
that.
any of y'all guilty of that? What?
That appalls me to hear that.
Oh, anyway, but, so these are just ways to communicate effectively with families. And it's just like, again, just taking the time to look at all the different family types that we have in our district and helping them and to be more inviting with them or to them. Okay. This is one of my most favorite topics, creating welcoming environments in schools to promote active family engagement. And it says school signage, it's the little thing, because he told you that. It's like, like in your book it said, stop, check into the office, before you step one more foot in or anything like that. They said, why not make it more welcoming, like, welcome to the building, huh? What?
We got a welcome sign that says that, but it's only on part of our building.
He was going to stand up and chant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to beat my head against the wall.
But that is true, and in your book it gave you examples of that.
Signs often tell people what not to do, where
Exactly.
not to go, what not to bring in,
Right.
Welcome. That's right. We welcome all unarmed people to our school. It says we must be good at what we do, greeting people warmly with a smile. And you do, they are our customers. And you all probably have heard me talk about this before, but I got to go to this national marketing meeting, a national PR meeting, when another superintendent was here, Dr. Ewing, and he had put me on this committee. And one thing that really always hit my mind was, it said, so imagine that you were going into a store. And in that store, the first thing you walked in and the person was like looking down, doing something on their phone and did not even speak to you. Did not speak to you. Don't really have to imagine that.
Yeah, exactly.
Anymore.
And, they didn't ask to help you, anything like that. There were stuff on the floor, so you're trying to get through the aisles and, just kind of dirty and messy and everything like that. And then imagine going into, and the first thing you came in, hey, hi, can I help you find something? And it was neat and clean and everything, the lighting was good and all that. Where would you go shopping at? And where would you feel more welcome? That's how our schools have to be. We have to see a warm smile when we come in. We have to truly, we want it to be clean, which our schools are. Our schools are spotless. And the lighting's so good and everything looks so nice. But that's because we're working with the customers, So making that inviting atmosphere.
We walked into RTI last week. You could eat off those floors.
Yeah.
Goodness
Yeah.
gracious. I could shave in those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Anyway, some of these things, let's see, follow through and trustworthiness. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you can't deliver, don't promise. And that was one thing he said. You say, I'm going to take care of that. You better be taking care of it. I remember one of my former superintendents told me, if you tell him you're going to kill him, the next day you better have a gun ready. He said, because you need to follow through. Of course, that was just like being extreme on that. But, and he also said, I won't tell you some of this, but a lot of things he said were so true that, you just had to always think of things. Former. It was former.
former school district.
No, he did say what I was going to say, but it didn't have anything to do with this, is why I stopped. But he said, always, when you're working with children, always think, what would you be saying if the parent was standing right outside the door? Or would you be talking with them with respect or that, or would you not be? And, I've always thought about that, If someone was watching me constantly, would I be acting differently with this child than I would normally? Something I always thought about when I've taught. Families and students must feel respected and well cared for. Like I said, they're our customers. We need to do that. They talked about the 10-second rule. Like, when someone walks to that building within 10 seconds, they should be recognized. Even if they're on the phone with somebody, they say, I'll be with you in a minute. Within 10 seconds, they say that is the key. Telephone answer. Don't just say, you want our secretaries to answer nicely. Hello, or welcome. It's a great day to be a bulldog. And then, how can I help you? The warm transfer. I can't help you with this, but let me get you on the line with so-and-so. They will be glad to help you. And then they said to go on and explain the problem to that person. So when they're back, say, I have explained your situation to Mr. So-and-so. He's aware of your situation. Then transfer him. So all that good stuff. CEO check-in. They talked about that, and I did not get that up there. It's about, like, as secretaries write down through the week what things are being called about or checked about, to have the CEO maybe pick one or two people, like on a Friday, and get back with them and just say, hey, was everything handled correctly, that type thing. And then a simple thank you goes a long way. So how good do you think our schools are doing it, especially the welcoming culture of our buildings?
One thing I'll say, I was just sitting here thinking, 20 years ago this semester was when I first brought one of my children to Raleigh Public Schools. And I did not feel welcome. I did not feel free to walk in. I did not necessarily feel respected. To me, it's tremendously different now.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in those areas there. That's one. I think it's I'm impressed with the way it is
right
now, and I hope it's that way with everyone who walks in. I'm assuming it is, but we just need to make sure that more people feel comfortable walking in.
mm-hmm.
I love at the high school, down in Amy's office, when you're walking in those lower doors, and you've got somebody at one of the little desks right out there in the front.
Right, it's either Drew or
Before
Holly.
I even
Yeah.
get to the office, I've got somebody right there.
Right.
And they are so eager and warm and friendly. That is a really kind of a nice extra touch.
Right. And, like I said, I think our districts, our district does a lot of things right. But once again, there's always, sometimes it's like even us, I think all of us, it's always a good thing to take a look at ourselves and see if we're kind of doing what we're preaching or doing what we say we're doing, kind of a self-look. The next page I think I have up there are just this, and I thought that was a pretty neat statement. There can be no relationship without trust. And it's got to be both ways. The parent coming in, the child coming in, the administrator, the teacher, all that. Those pages I put down, and the reason I did that, just for you all to kind of look at those pages, page 106, school and parent actions that promote mistrust. There were a list of those. I don't know if you want to look at those or not, but those are some things that I'm thinking, like, if we go with this, to kind of get in more detailed next year. These are some things like we could talk about, like on page 106, school actions that can promote mistrust. Like, I'm not going to read them all, of course, but inaccurate information, out-of-date information, a lack of information on the websites, so you could, like, these could be things we could talk about. Is everybody keeping up their website? Are the phone numbers correctly? Are the emails correct? All those kinds of things. And then, down to parental actions, sporadic attendant patterns of children. Who's responsible? It's a parent's responsibility to get their child to be educated, to get them to school, And so I think that's those are neat things. And like I said, these are things I think that we can delve into deeper next year. And then that 109 and 110, ideas to promote trusting relationships between schools and every family. And just, common sense things, but again, just taking another look at them. Every family, regardless of their station in life, can make a contribution. Oh, these are things like I thought was kind of neat, like, do you disagree or agree? Like every family, regardless of their station in life, can make a contribution toward their children's education. What do you say? I mean, most of these, you agree with. Parents should have a voice in the education of their children, of course. But these could then extend into deeper conversations.
I was going to ask, the list is clearly designed for us to agree with all of them.
Right.
But the third one about parents should have a voice in selecting teachers for their children, I wavered on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't necessarily have all of the information. I mean, you can't have all the teachers coming in saying, I want this, all the family, parents coming in saying, I want this teacher for my child.
Exactly.
So that one I really disagree with.
And I think we
But
don't
there
do.
is-
I took it differently.
There is a mechanism for them to, this, having been a former teacher, there may be situations where their friends, their relatives, they're twins and they don't want them in the same classroom. There's an ability for them to sit down with a principal and state reasons why they think that once the assignment's been made, that a change can be made, but not necessarily selecting who that person might be. And as a principal, we talk with parents and teachers. If you've got a legacy that several people are coming in and saying they don't even know you, they say they don't want to have you because of a reputation you have, then you'd be better be thinking about how you might be doing things different. They don't necessarily have a choice based upon what someone else might say. This teacher, the reputation of the staff member, because most of the time it's not necessarily true, but it's just something that somebody said. But in some cases, there's a pattern that starts to develop, and so requests are made on false information. But there's still a discussion point with the teacher as well. Why do you think it is that we're dealing with this particular request not to have you? We've had those before, and that requires a different level of communication and trust with parents in a kind of a deeper initial interaction you have. So there is not necessarily a way to say, because you have to, everybody would be selecting a particular teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
Based on that as well.
Right.
I wasn't thinking of it as I want Mr. Smith for my teacher, but my child responds best to this type of
That's
teacher,
correct.
this type of
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
That would be the collaboration.
Yeah.
And most of the principals, all of them, receive the information from when the classes move from one level to the next to try to place kids in classes where that chemistry can be good.
The teacher has a particular strong suit, and it's known that child needs more of that. There's going to be a reason to try to place him there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to say, just from my own personal experience, I think we do pretty good at that. So I think the teachers and staff have done a pretty good job of identifying.
Yeah, if they all don't get what they want, then there is that happens too. But there is the opportunity to have that discussion.
Right. And then on 115, 116, great list for school administrators to review. And so these are the things I've said I was thinking that would be great, like to really delve into next year. Like the one starts with, do your school entrances welcome every family? Just things to look at your building, just kind of a checklist. And if not, then what can we do about it? Our entrance is clearly marked, is handicap parking marked, all that. And then just those other pages are tips and ideas to improve relationships with better communication. And, we can talk about it. we can talk about it all we want, and we can make board policy, but it's actually going to happen in the buildings. And so that's why I think it's really important that maybe we continue with this book next year and actually maybe like if we still do board member for every building, maybe that board member can make some time to go in and actually sit down or
Probably
have.
make it a little easier than that with, if we continue with the school improvement presentations where there's just a piece in there where they address
Some of these
from
things, right.
that.
Yeah, the culture of the building.
You know,
And-
it's interesting, the recommendations on welcoming entrances, because, you know, we're dealing with an anniversary of Sandy Hook, and we, after those events take place, what school districts were looking at very intensely, we were already looking at it, were the designs of security vestibules, the debate whether we should buzz people in to offices, not have access in. So there's a tension between unconditional accessibility to a school building at a particular entrance and welcoming to in-school safety. And you seem to move up and down that continuum based upon a reaction to events that occur.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always been trying to strike the right balance, working with our law enforcement, looking at procedures, looking at facility design, and the communication that kids are hopefully having with staff members to mitigate that. But you know, to Jamie's point, I want someone to walk in and just love what they see and be welcomed. Most of the time, the people know who those folks are coming in, but not all the time is that the case. And so that's the difficult one.
Well, with everything that has happened in our society with school issues like that, it's never going to go back to the way it was. There always has to be the security issue, because like when we do those, when we've done our surveys, school safety is one of the biggest issues.
Right.
And keeping our children safe is one of the biggest issues. So, you know, they can be safe, being buzzed in and all that, but once they get to that first person, that secretary or whatever.
Didn't the woman from Sandy Hook say, though, that they had a buzzer on their door? But
Well,
the gun?
my point is it changed the routes, and
Right.
it changed the language on the doors became, and the conceal and carry laws that we're required to post. If we don't post it, we have to post this, that you can't come in this building. We have a policy in place. We have the ability to let people come in our buildings with conceal and carry should the board decide to do that. We don't do that. We don't, only law enforcement, and that's who we want to have it. So when you clearly see that when you come in, and that therein lies, is that a welcoming sign? No. Is it one that some parents would say, your buildings aren't safe enough? We believe you should have metal detectors. This is why we are here.
Sure.
We should have metal detectors and no access to this building. That people should be able to swipe a key card before the. I walk in several buildings across this state, and you have to go through 3 or 4 door vestibules, have to be buzzed in, and you hear an intercom before you get in, and that gives great comfort to a sector of parents whose children are in our buildings. Propped up against what we also were talking about is in this book, our buildings should be welcoming. So there's a
Yeah.
And so where is that balance? You know, and
Well-
and metal detectors and security vestibules don't do it all. Just like it, but procedures and relationships so students feel safe in reporting things. Because I think. Our law enforcement would tell us most of the time, and that's what studies show, when these events happen, someone knew something, someone reported. A lot of these that we don't hear about are avoided because of a relationship between staff and law enforcement and students. So we put a lot of emphasis on that, along with the training and the buildings open and things of that sort. So while I understand that, there's another.
Sure. And, you know,
side to that.
it goes back to, like, everything is about relationships.
And a sign doesn't necessarily build a relationship,
No.
Right.
but the person who's right there welcoming them when they walk in the door.
Is, right.
You know, the eye
Right.
contact and the.
And I think if it went, if it was between the sign and safety, parents would take
Well, I
safety.
don't want to beat up the sign.
But I mean, but you know what I mean.
Jamie's point is well taken.
I
There are
agree, though,
places
yeah.
To do that, and we
Yeah.
need to do better at that.
We should have a welcome sign at every door.
Yeah.
Period. I believe that 100%. I'll go back to what you were saying about being busy and having time for teachers or anybody to talk with parents. Some of the schools, and I'm not going to say who because I'm not sure who it is, but they've taken time together as a faculty to write postcards to parents. Instead of having another meeting, they said, let's sit down and write positive postcards to the parents of kids. So that's taking time. Maybe they, could have been talking about something else that had to do with academics or whatever else in the school, but they took time to do that. We take time from teachers out of classrooms all the time for professional development, whether it be technology training or whatever. Maybe we should consider giving them time out of their classroom to make contacts with parents like you're talking about. So
You know,
part of it is how we set up
Right.
the opportunities for
Right.
teachers to make those
true.
contacts.
And like, if you do like a team regiment, like team teaching regiment, and you have your team meetings, we used to do it to where, your first team meeting was all about what you're planning for the week. So every teacher didn't give a test on Tuesday. So the math, the science, we all planned so everybody knew what was going on in each other's classroom the next week. Our next team meeting was student talk. Who's having trouble? Who needs to be relocated? Who needs to talk to the assistance team about blah, blah, blah. The next team were phone calls and postcards. Phone calls and postcards. So teachers really, if they could set, if they could kind of set precedents to set up their time to do those kinds of things, little things like that, where, that really could change the whole culture of how things are happening in the
Just
building.
making it a priority.
And and thinking it through. Like, a lot of it, like they say, a lot of it is staff training and professional training. And we do a lot of professional development. But maybe this would be something, another like professional development idea on how you make, how do you start a culture change? How do you make these things to engage more parents? Maybe we should, maybe that would be a good idea for professional development. And I'm not saying our teachers are doing a fabulous job, but gosh, I always like to hear different ideas and new ideas and how people are doing things to try to reconnect and make relationships better, But it's just, like, I've had people stop me and say, I got a postcard this week. And I've even had people post it on Facebook. This is a postcard that I got from my son's
That
teacher.
and phone calls are pretty powerful.
They are very powerful. And that's what I used to tell beginning teachers, that first week of school, call every parent. Just to say, hi, I'm your teacher this year. And I sure like having John in class. Call me if you need me. Then you make that first initial contact positive. And it's just little things like that, very little things that can change the culture of a building. So, and some of these ideas I think are fabulous in here too. But I really think it'd be great if we could delve into them a little bit deeper as we get along. So, I'm finished.
You're going to hear more about it next time we talk about this book.
All right, are you on next?
Okay.
All right.
Are we doing 2 things then?
We're just going to do one from here on.